get this defrost fan out of the door and get this set for the next batch. The last batch was cooked hamburger for my sister and some stuffing. And there's the water out of that, close to 3/4 of a gallon. Perfect amount for a batch, because you can go a long time without worrying about getting water in the oil when you have that size of a batch. Before I put the thermometer underneath, I used a little grabber tool and a paper towel to make sure that there's no water anywhere, or I mean, I can see if there's any bits of food or anything, you can just see in there, but if there's any little water droplets, you can kind of grab them out with the grabber and a paper towel. And you could even use like a disinfectant wipe if you wanted to, I suppose, and get into all the little corners. You could use this in between your main cleanings. But mainly I just kind of push it around in there, make sure that there's no water droplets, make sure there's no debris or anything on it. If there's anything on it, then I'll know it's probably time to do a thorough cleaning again. But all I'm seeing is just a couple of little drops of water, and that's it. So that's done. Get the thermometer underneath, and then with a damp paper towel, I'm going to go around the seal once real quick. And some kind of lint-free cloth would probably be just the ideal thing to make sure that you don't leave any lint on that seal. And get the little plastic disc into place and get it ready for pre-cooling. So the next batch is another thing out of the freezer, just blocks that have been waiting for their turn. I think I'm doing rice this next time, but we'll see, whatever's basically top on the stack of blocks in there, and we'll get them going. So I want to make sure that there's a ring all the way around there, and right now there's not. There's a little space here and up here. Okay, and when it's warm like this, room temperature, the seal is very pliable, so it's real easy to just give it a little twist with the palette knife and it just pushes it up against the door. Now get the drain valve closed. With the drain valve closed, it's ready to start it up, and I'll get it pre-cooling. I'm going to use Customize and Start Custom and continue. Okay, the machine's display showing that it's 67 degrees in there. I wanted to get it to about the same temperature as the freezers, which is somewhere between -5 and 5. And I don't mind if it's even 10 degrees and dropping, because by the time I get the food on the trays and get them over here, usually they've warmed up to about 10 degrees. But I don't want to put ice cold food in a warm freeze dryer and have it thaw out before it has a chance to get cold all the way. So as soon as that's cold, we'll get the food on the trays. All right, so I need some parchment papers for the trays. So this is how I've got it set up. Got the marks on the table so I know where to put this ruler. The tape's getting a little worn. I should put a new piece on there, but that'll hold well enough. And then I still have my little mini roll that I cut on the chop saw. And this is my last one, so it's going to be time to cut a new roll pretty soon. And if I remember, I'll link the video to how I cut this roll. It'd be like right over here or something. I don't know how that works. Anyway, so I'll try to remember to link the video to cutting this on the chop saw. So this is my last one, so I will be doing it again pretty soon. Down to the last few. So since finishing that 50 batch series, we've been trying to empty some of the extras out of the freezer. And a few more have been made during then, just because the normal course of living. If we get a Costco rotisserie chicken, I like to make chicken broth out of the bones, and that's going to be another batch of rice. So we'll continue cleaning up this freezer a bit and getting ready for making more batches as we continue forward. So So I am going to go ahead and do a batch of rice. So we need enough for 10 whole blocks or up to 20 half blocks. So 1, 2, 3. So we'll take some of these and we'll get the corrugated plastic pieces to keep things insulated off the tables. Here's the rest of that rice. So we've got full blocks and half blocks, and then the trays. So I've got the rice ready to go onto the trays, so we'll get those moved over. So here's one of the full 1 pound blocks of rice. So that's 2.5 pounds of rice on there. So 1865. And tray 2. Got a couple of the little pieces getting away, which will be kind of nice. That means this is going to crumble up nicely to use kind of like minute rice. 1861. And tray 3. And then this, I'll just do some extra half blocks. Because once this batch is freeze dried, I think these are just going to crumble apart. But I'll still know how much was on there before it started. I'm going to go ahead and add one of the whole blocks here. And then another half block. I forgot I still have another tray. I was putting that away. 1843. And tray 4. So I'm going to go ahead and use the full size blocks first and save those half ones for later. 1862. So the rest of these half blocks will go in the freezer, waiting for their turn. So I'm going to try to get thermometers in there like I usually do. Whoa. But I'm not going to worry about it too much because I'm going to have to drill through this one into that one a bit. Okay. It's not the perfect placement, but that'll work. So I have my thermometers in. Thermometers are not necessary for freeze drying. The thing that it helps me the most with is when they finish and I'm not there, and so the machine is stopped, I can tell if the food is still warm, so if it's safe to take it out without having to worry about condensation. That's my #1 use for it. So now we'll get them moved over to the freeze dryer and get them in. The freeze dryer's been pre-cooling for about 50 minutes now, and it's about 19 degrees and dropping real well. So it's cold enough to put the food in my opinion. I like to make sure that it's close to the temperature of the food going in, so it's not warming up the food. So, gonna put them in starting at the bottom with tray 4. So the thermometers are showing about 10 to 20 degrees right now. Probably partially depends on how deep I got them into the centers. So I want to make sure that that is resealed. Okay, it looks like I've got a ring all the way around the seal, so that's good. It'll start itself in about 6 hours. If it's cold before that, then we can start it earlier. On the newer ones, on the newer software, the machine, once it gets down to temperature, would automatically bypass the rest of the time, if I understand it correctly. On the older one, it's simply time. So you set the time and then you can adjust it, and you can skip past it when you're in the manual or customize mode like this, which is why I always run it in customize. Plus the display gives me more information when it's in customize. If it was in the regular mode, it doesn't display all the same information. So I really like to see the information, and I can walk by and know where it's at, what it's doing, and how far along it is. Anyway, we'll be back in about 2 days. I'll be right back, don't go away. The batch of rice finished and cooled for a while, so I restarted it to warm it up. Now it's about to finish again after warming way more than necessary to get it warm. It's been another 2 or 3 hours. So we'll get it out and check it, weigh it and put it back in, and then give it that dry check time of a couple hours and then check it again. If it doesn't lose any weight during this, then we know that it was actually dry at 35 hours, so hours ago, because that's when it actually finished last night. So this rewarming won't really change anything perhaps. So it's finished. We'll open the drain valve.
Yeehaw!
Okay, get the... And I am going to switch the tray positions again. Okay. So the temperature in the tray says that it's over 100, about 105, 110 degrees. And it's been cooling for 15 minutes now. Okay, 1134. Tray 2. 1102. Well, those are kind of interesting because those are quite a bit apart right now, and they were much closer. So we'll put them back up. So we're going to put tray 2 up on the top spot this time, and tray 1 down here. Okay, tray 3. 1093, and it's bouncing down, so 1093, and it's minus because it's bouncing down to 92. Tray 4, 1120. Okay, let's go back up. 4. I'm going to put 4 up here. And 3 down here. With those back in there, we'll restart it, give it 2 more hours, and then reweigh them. If they don't lose any weight, that means they're already dry now. And we'll put the time from a few hours ago as the time that they were finished. Okay, drain valve is closed. We'll put more dry time. Drain valve's closed. Continue and restart. We'll be back in 2 hours or more, depending if I have anything I have to do. If I can't be back in 2 hours, I'll add time to keep it running until I can be back and reweigh it. But the plan will be to be back in about 2 hours, weigh it, and if they're finished, take them out and bag them. So don't go away, we'll be right back. I'm back, and it's about 2 hours later. Time to get the rice out and see just how dry it is now. If it's dry, it'll get bagged. So let's get it stopped. You can see it only has a little more than 5 minutes to go. I'll bypass that using the down arrow and making it so much quieter. I'm leaving it running until I confirm that they're dry. That way, if they need more time, they can go back in and it's still cold and ready. So next, open the drain valve. Okay, I'm going to start with tray 1 again. 1134 and no change. Tray 2. 1101, and it's bouncing up to the 2, so there's a fraction. And of course that could be just minor differences in how well the scale functions. Okay, tray 3. Okay, 1093, and bouncing down to 2, which is what it was doing the previous batch, or the previous check, not batch. And 1120 for tray 4, so no change. So I can finish that with no defrost and make it so much quieter. Okay, with that done, I'll get the thermometer out from underneath And I just put it up on that shelf, and I'll get my little defrost baffle into place. And I use a fan to defrost it. I don't use the defrost function because I don't want to use the tray heaters when I can just use a cheap fan and save any wear and tear on the electronics. And this uses very little power. So I'll wait to turn that on until we get the time and the power usage. So I'll get the trays over to the bagging area and then come back and get the time. So it doesn't look like we lost any weight since the original check. So I'm going to put that it took 35 hours, 11 minutes for this batch, because that's the original time that it had before I added this time to do the check. So that's the time I'm using for this batch. Now we'll check the power usage. So the power meter is showing that it used 27.05 kilowatt hours. And it's actually less than that because it kept running during the dry checking and after it finished at night. So it would have been less than that. So that's the maximum. I'll reset that and get it ready for the next batch. Okay, now on to the bagging. Okay, we'll get the final weights without the thermometers and then figure out the bagging. I know that each one of these bigger blocks was 1 pound and the smaller blocks were a ½ pound. I will be bagging it in 1 pound increments, or at least that's my plan. I may have to go less if they won't fit in a bag. And we'll see how easily these come apart or if they stay together fairly solid. It depends on how it's cooked each time. So now on to bagging. Now we'll get the thermometers out and get the final weights and find out what they lost. So 1126, 1093, 1086, 1112. Now we'll get the net weights on those and figure out how much per pound now. Don't go away, I'll be right back. So I'm just taking the gross weight of 1126. I'm going to subtract out the tare weight, the weight of the tray and paper, which on that tray. So tray 1 is 754. And so that's 372 grams for the weight of the rice on tray 1. That gives 345 grams. 344 for that tray, the 750 of that tray, 362. Okay, now we'll add those together. 1,423 grams now. So that was 10 pounds. Now it's 1,423 grams, and that's roughly it's 3.14, so roughly pi pounds. That's 3,014 grams of water lost. So that means each pound needs approximately 301 grams of water back in, and each pound now weighs about 142.3 grams. I'm going to put them in 1 quart bags with the label attached to it saying the batch number, and I've got it written here in felt pen in case I lose this tag, and then what it is, the date that it went into the freeze dryer, and then the amount that it was before it was dried, and then I'll add on here how much it needs to get it back to what it was. And depending on how fragile these are, I might break the whole thing up and put it into a big Ziploc. So let's check that out. I'm going to start by moving some of the bigger blocks. Well, it looks like they're pretty fragile. I might try just crumbling them all up and in a Ziploc. So I'm going to look at that first. Okay, so what I want to try now is I'm going to just try breaking up one of these blocks to find out how fragile they are, to see if they'll crumble up into like the individual grains of rice for the bagging purposes. Because some of them do, and sometimes the broth I make is a little bit thick and sticky, and so it doesn't do that very well. These look like they're going to do well, so I think I'm going to go ahead and crumble these up into a big Ziploc. Yeah, that's just kind of falling apart. That way it'll be easier to get them into that bag, I think. And I could do it individually, or I could put it all together. So that's what I'm going to try this. So that crumbled up extremely easily. Now there's still a question as to whether or not it'll fit in one of those bags. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch of these together to get kind of a mix for the weight reasons. And I'll add this tray to it. And that'll give me 5 pounds of rice all in one bag. So I'm still trying to be kind of gentle with the rice because I don't want to make it into powder or anything. I just want to separate the grains. And I know I'm going to be breaking some of the rice by doing this, but again, I'm going to try to be pretty gentle with it. Now I'm going to try to get that bag into 5 of these bags. We'll get these labeled and open, and we'll be right back. I've got those 2 trays into this bag and kind of mixed around, and I'm trying to just take any of the bigger clumps and just kind of separate the grains. I don't want to crush them or powder the rice. I just want to separate the pieces so that they'll flow into the final bag easier. Now, I've measured them out, and it needs to be about 142 grams for each bag to now equal 1 pound. Some people have asked, well, why not just store the rice uncooked? I like to have it cooked because it's ready to eat. Because what if when I need it, some kind of emergency, I don't have the ability to cook it? This is ready to eat. It's dry, but it's still delicious. Whereas uncooked rice is not really ready to eat. So this is ready to use just the way it is. So now I'm going to try to get 142 grams into each one of these bags so that it's the equivalent of a pound. And I'm not sure it'll fit. So I want about 140 grams. All right, well there we are. There's 1 pound of rice for the wet weight. Of course, it's nowhere near that now. And it needs about 300 grams of water. And remember, with water, grams and cubic centimeters and milliliters all work out to the same. So that would be 300 milliliters of water. And this particular measuring cup has milliliters right on it. So 300 milliliters is about a cup and a quarter. But I still try to use the scale all the time for weighing my ingredients because it's easier to get accuracy. That's why I always refer to it in grams, because I'm going to weigh it out on the scale. But I need to remember to reference that more often, that 300 grams is also 300 milliliters when it comes to water. When I say 300 grams, just think milliliters on your measuring, or use the scale. Okay, so now we'll do the other 2 trays. Same thing. I'm just gonna, since that worked out, I'm just gonna go ahead and dump these in there. So same thing. So about 142 grams for each bag. As I mentioned, if you pre-cook the rice before you bag it, like I do, then you've got rice that's edible. It's dry, but especially with the chicken broth, it's quite delicious. The rice is all bagged in 1 quart bags, and these are the older quart bags, which aren't actually a quart. They're only 3/4 of a quart. The newer bags that I have, as soon as I finish using up all my older ones, are actually a quart. So these only can hold up to 24 ounces. So that will change a little bit on how I bag things, because I'll be able to put a full quart in them. And I'm used to the fact that these are only 3/4 of a quart. Now, I'm going to add 300 cc oxygen absorbers to each bag, and then zipper them shut, and then heat seal them. Okay, I cut the top off. Oh, you can see it's already turned dark. This sensor is just so fast, or indicator. It's very impressive. Okay, I'm going to take each oxygen absorber and kind of tuck it down the side of the bag a little bit, and slide the bag over a little bit so I don't forget which ones have it. And I'm tucking them down the sides to make sure that they don't end up getting caught in the seal area or in the zipper itself. So now I'll get them zippered. And these, with these bags, I really don't have any extra space at the top to push out the air. So I'm just going to zipper them shut. If there is any extra air, I'll kind of try to squeeze it out and get that zipper area, the seal area, nice and flat for sealing. And now onto the heat sealer. I'm going to lift this bar up to show this better. So these are nice and full. If they were the true quart bags, there would still be a little bit more space up on top, and I'd squeeze out the extra air, or use a vacuum sealer to vacuum out the extra air. This is an impulse sealer. It's the Impact brand, and I think it's still very similar to what Harvest Right is sending out now. They're a wonderful sealer. I've used this type. I've used this one for 5 years. I've used this type for 40 years. This brand even. Anyway, been real happy with them. So I'm making sure that the seal itself, the top edge of the bag, is nice and smooth and flat. So there are no wrinkles. And I'm keeping the seal area right at the top. And for these bags, this heat sealer goes from 0 to 8 on the settings, and I have it set for about a 6 for these heavy bags. I'm going to do it twice on this first bag just to help get everything up to temperature. Okay, then you can see I've got a nice wide seal all the way across the top. No wrinkles. It's well sealed in there. And I've got enough room for at least 2 or 3 more tries down below that if I fail on this one, if it has wrinkles, if I'm not happy with it, or if I want to cut some off, open it, and then reseal it. And you can see this bag is a little bit wavy, and that's where really smoothing it out and making sure that I've got a good seal area, I feel, is pretty important. Okay, and we'll continue until those are all done. Okay, so that one looks wrinkly to me, so I'm not happy with that seal. I'm going to curve it over there, really smooth it out, and I'm going to hold the top edge down around this bar, which stretches that out a little bit, makes it even more smooth. And then I'll just press that down alongside the fingers. I'm going to let that cool for just a second. Okay, there, I'm happy with that one. You can see that top one has some little wrinkles in it, and it's probably fine and probably completely sealed as far as air goes, but I don't like the look of it. I just went ahead and added another one below it just to make sure, and that one looks great. And there's still room for 2 more tries if I fail on that one. It will be below the tear-off strip if I do 2 more, but then you just have to cut it. You could even cut it below the zipper, and you just have to use it or transfer it. But I want a good seal. All right, looks great. I'm going to add a gross weight to each bag. That way, if water or moisture starts migrating into that bag, I'll be able to tell just by putting it on a scale. 167 grams, 167. I'll write that on the bottom corner of the bag, and so I know what this bag weighs, just like this. Okay, as soon as those are finished, we'll move over to the bins and put them in. Yeehaw! The rice cooked with the chicken broth are in 10-quart bags, and they're ready to go in a bin. So adding to the bins that we used for the first 50 batches, I'm going to add these to bin 7. There's still space in a few of the bins, and once we get them all filled, we'll report on how many did fit into the bins. So we'll get those moved in there. You can see there's still a little bit of space left in this bin. And if I can't get all these 10 bags in there, we'll put some in a different bin. But I'm going to start with this one and see what will fit. So that adds one more batch to bin 7. Double check to make sure it fits without crushing anything. Okay, so it does touch the lid, but it's not pushing on the lid, so that's fine. And as the oxygen is absorbed from these, they'll suck down a little bit and add that little bit more space right here. So until the next batch, that's it. I wanted to show some rehydrating of some rice. What is essentially homemade minute rice with better flavor, having been cooked with chicken broth. But I didn't want to rehydrate any of the current batch. So this was rice that was rehydrated about 2 years ago. The water to rice ratio was about the same with this older batch. It's about 1 part rice to 2 parts water by weight. We used boiling water to rehydrate the rice. And then give it 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and it's ready to use. On this particular batch of rice, we used it in some shells and then also covered with some beef stew Mexican style that we like. And then some cheese and tomatoes and sour cream and avocado slices. It's really delicious.